Joining us now with more on the Trump verdict and a busy week in Springfield, host of the WGN Political Report, Paul Lisnek. Paul, strange question.
What a week.
Strange question to ask after a felony conviction, but who won the week, Trump or Biden?
You know, it's actually a really interesting question because it depends what win means. If win means, is Trump able to turn around and spin what happened to him? Time will tell. We're not quite sure yet, but early indications are he hasn't lost his supporters. Elected officials still behind him. They're talking about this whole thing as a witch hunt and all that kind of thing, and the whole system was rigged. If you look at the financials, while we don't know how Biden did since the conviction, we do know, at least from the reporting from Trump and his people, that they're doing very well with this. We have to wait until those numbers are formal so that we know what the truth is. But on the other hand, I was struck this morning, Ben and Micah, as I was, watched Trump do his thing from Trump Tower and then President Biden talking about the situation in Israel and all that. And I was struck to myself saying, yeah, look how we are all wrapped up in this just craziness that's going on surrounding Trump, but the world is going on.
Right.
And so we take the moment, and as Biden talked about the possible ceasefire in the Middle East, and it just it was a moment of sober reality saying, yeah, there are things that a president needs to address.
I think you talked about this a little bit earlier too, Ben. They're not looking at the facts and not looking at what's going on in the nation, not looking at what's going on in the world. They're talking about Trump, 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 Trump right now.
That's all that matters.
And the president, as you say, has been talking about a little bit about Hamas and Gaza and things like that, but we're not seeing a lot of him. Should we be seeing more of him?
You might see that on June 27th. That's the first debate, because I'm going to guess that the CNN moderators will talk about policy, but you are right. If you think about, in fact, without getting into debate, but what is Trump's policy on abortion, on mifepristone, on conception? He keeps saying, I will give you my policy. It's coming in a week and coming in 2 weeks. It doesn't seem to come. So the focus has been him and his legal perils and troubles, and that's fine, but you're right. We have to decide about policy in those issues as well.
I want to talk about an issue that's going to affect the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago. There was this thing in Ohio that they actually fixed today, but basically the Democrats said, oh, we're going to do a virtual nomination because we had to meet this Ohio deadline.
Or he wouldn't be on the ballot.
Or he wouldn't be on the ballot.
Can they legally do that?
Well, that was the law. And Mike DeWine, who's a Republican governor, said, fix this.
Yeah.
Right, and it's now fixed.
Yes.
But they're still going to do a virtual roll call of states, and some have speculated Democrats want to do it on tape so they don't have people speaking out of turn, whether that's somebody protesting the war in Gaza or some other issue.
You know, I think it's a mistake to do the earlier vote, because my reaction when they were, and I understood why they had to do it. If Ohio's law didn't change, then they had to do what they were doing with the virtual vote prior to the convention, because the Ohio deadline, I think, was August 6th or something like that. But the bottom line is it takes all the wind out of the sails, right? I mean, look, you both have covered enough conventions. The fun part is being there and the states chime in and we hit that number, and who gets the honor of actually presenting the number that puts them over. So on the Democratic side, it was going to be like, well, this is a done deal. We already know this. They've been through it. You might as well run the tape. I think that's a mistake. The point you raised, Ben, is probably what's going on, concerns about what's going on. But they're still, I mean, they still have to go through the motions, right? They're not going to skip it. So I think they're making a mistake. Hopefully they will change that. But I think it's a mistake to not let the drama of that moment and the momentum of Democrats for Biden that night shine through.
Let's come a little bit more local. Springfield, the budget issue, 5 a.m. Wednesday morning they were there. My goodness gracious. I was not. But there are a lot of things that they didn't take care of, like the Bears Stadium and things like that. So what's going to happen?
So the next time they all get together is the fall. And listen.
And this just stays in limbo?
Yeah, pretty much. But, well, you know what? Listen, the Bears reacted to this as well. So I don't know whether or not the Bears, or White Sox for that matter, actually expected Springfield to act on that. But, they had this $53.1 billion budget to deal with, migrant funding, all the stuff that was on their mind, the notion of, and let's talk about a couple of billion for the Chicago Bears or whatever the White Sox want here. It just wasn't going to be a smart thing for them to have on the agenda. The decision didn't have to be made right now. It can certainly wait to the fall. And the response of the Bears are, we look forward to continuing the dialogue, and I think that makes sense. Katrina's Law. They're waiting for the Supreme Court to address a case that has to do with domestic violence and gun ownership. They want to see what the court does. So there's kind of reasons behind not taking things on, but I imagine when it's 4:47 in the morning and you're trying to pass the budget, you have to say we don't have time for these other things.
But that also went to the fact that Democrats, while they have a supermajority in Springfield, this was a tougher budget year.
They lost some votes. They had to do it 3 times.
Yeah. Talk about the dynamic at play there. Is this because hey, the good times are over, the COVID money spigot has been turned off, and we actually have to make some hard decisions?
You know, one of the good news I think that you can take out of this, the notion of whatever the governor wants, any guy, I don't mean Pritzker, but whatever the governor wants, when the governor's a Democrat, every Democrat must get in line. And what we're seeing is, no, not necessarily. And different
Brandon Johnson learning that in the Chicago City Council
but
as
isn't
well.
that the point? Maybe there's something in the water right now about saying we don't have to stand behind any grand leader. I have constituents to represent. I don't want to see the issues on the budget, of course, had to do with revenue spending and where it was coming from. And Republicans very unhappy with regard to where the money is being spent, how they're raising it. So a lot of differences. But Republicans' position is, and thanks for not even having us at the table. We just weren't even invited to these numbers.
And the child tax credit, that's another thing they didn't address.
So the child tax credit, which of course people will like, right? But the thing is, any kind of tax credit, I'm always not confused about it, but it's not like you're actually getting money. The money comes later, right? It's when you file your taxes. So you still feel the pain at the time you're paying.
I do want to talk city politics real quickly, and this notion that Brandon Johnson has stood behind the CTA president, Dorval Carter, who was in front of a hearing and said race is the reason people have been attacking him. How has Dorval Carter managed to stay on the job when almost half the aldermen have said, get rid of this guy?
Well, look, he's doing what he feels he needs to do to keep the job, right? And what you just quoted is the focus of what he said. You know, you're concerned because the top of the CTA is an African American and stuff. Look, I've had Scott Waguespack on my show. We've talked to various aldermen. That's just not what's behind all of this. You know, there have like,
what do they say is behind it?
Well, he doesn't show up to city council meetings when they want to talk to him. He's not handling deficits as he should be. I mean, everything I've ever heard, and I'm sure you've heard, it's been about fiscal policy.
Operations.
Exactly. And so if they're not, it's okay if people aren't happy with you, get on the stick about that and try and fix it. But to sort of turn the whole thing and say this is racist, I think is sort of I don't know if that's how helpful that's going to be as you try and resolve it.
You think his fate is sealed?
Well, to the aldermen, they can't make it happen. So the question is if Johnson sticks behind him. But Brandon Johnson has some pressure coming on a few issues. So what battles does he want to fight?
Right. Paul Lising. Oh, what's on your show?
Oh, so I've got Congressman Mike Quigley coming to join me. We're going to talk about all of this, the Trump stuff, Ukraine, Israel, and all those issues, and the trouble Democrats might be in right now. And then based on the budget, House Minority Leader Tony McCombie will be talking about, and I plan to ask her that very question, like, why weren't you all at the table? We'll talk about that.
This is exhausting. Thank you, Paul.
I hate to say it, but it's really interesting.
I know you love it.